So branding, super important for everybody in the B2B world, or is it? Does brand matter? All these kind of data points that show that it grows. There's always statistics that show that it doesn't actually grow a business. So let's get right into that by speaking to one of the leading experts that I know in the world of B2B branding, which is Alan Edwards. Alan, welcome to Crossing the Pond. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Richard. Good to be here.
So let's start at the top. What is brand? What does brand mean in the world of B2B?
Well, in the world of B2B, it means exactly the same as the brand in any other context, whether that's your personal brand, whether it's the brand of a B2C company or, any other manifestation of a brand. It's how you appear in the market, how you show up, what your position is, how people understand and recognize you and have the option to be able to choose you as, a preference for whatever it is that they are in the market for.
And so why is it important in today's B2B world when buying is so complicated? There's so many different services. There's so many different brands. I was at an industry show recently. There's all these different brands screeching for my attention. Why is brand important? And is it important?
Well, yes, it's important. It's probably one of the most fundamentally important aspects of a marketer's job and one of the most fundamentally important aspects of a B2B business in the way that every other business. And what you described there, Richard, of all screaming for attention, loads of them out there. It's exactly that reason that brand is important, is that somehow you've got to be recognizable and people need to be aware of you, because if not, they're not going to consider you in the first place. So your job is going to be much, much harder without that degree of recognition.
The world of B2B is dominated by innovators who are creating technologies, creating solutions, may not really fully understand what role does a brand play. They come up with a great idea, they've got a great solution, it's selling, it's working. Why should they be investing in a brand when they've got all that going on?
I mean, it's a classic, isn't it? And particularly for you and I guess, because we've probably spent most of our time not only in B2B, but also in B2B tech. And perhaps tech is probably the worst exponent generally of this kind of thing, because they come from some original engineering idea, a new piece of software or whatever. And, it's a kind of classic path, really, that, you come up with this thing, you go out to market, usually with the owner or the founder, you go early, you get out there, people like what you're selling, they buy it, the business grows, and it all works well. So there's nothing that's kind of debunking the idea that you need a brand, because look, it's all working, I'm growing.
Yeah.
Which is fine and true. And in most cases, that's how things happen at the beginning, or certainly in the early life of a company with a new product, or a new product indeed in an existing company. But there comes a point where your ability to grow, your critical mass, your position in the market now is being challenged, and your own, if you like, your own goals, your own targets are suddenly now becoming more challenging in the space that you operate for a number of reasons. One, we all know that if, it doesn't matter what your tech is, however differentiated or advanced it might be, if you've got 6 months advantage, you're lucky. So first factor is you're going to be surrounded by competitors and like products. And so now your space is more crowded. So then now back to your point, there's more noise. And why would they choose you? Because now you've lost your differentiation to a large extent. Because actually your differentiation might well have existed, not just in your product, but in other parts of your company ethos, who you are, where you came from, how you did it. And because you've not yet invested in building that, your brand, you don't own that in the market. And now you're being compared with, well, I've got one of those too. It's the same, who's the cheapest? And
it becomes commoditized.
Yeah. Or undifferentiated, at least, even if it's still premium, it's premium with other premium offers that, are the same.
At best. You described the business leader and the business journey that an organization might go on, quite cynical potentially towards the world of building a brand. If you look at the B2B world, you've worked with so many different B2B organizations over the years. In fact, it might be useful to do a quick recap of just some of the experiences you've had in the world of B2B and the extent to which you feel that branding has been appreciated within those contexts.
So for me, it all started with a brand that still, does exceedingly well. It's one of those brands that nobody ever got fired for buying and all that kind of thing. But I started with IBM, and probably to this day, most of what I kind of know, do, or whatever, it falls back on stuff that I learned at IBM back in the day. And it's almost like it kind of debunks everything that we're talking about or going to talk about, because actually IBM is a brand and it knows it's a brand and it's always known it's a brand and it behaves like a brand and it works like a brand and so on and so forth. So I guess in a way that's where I started and I learned. And then I've moved around other large techs that also are, or certainly at the time were, brands and operated like brands, like Sun Microsystems back in the day. But I've worked with many, many smaller companies that didn't have that kind of brand mentality, brand thinking, probably more of those kind of companies. So Pier 1, where you and I first met, of course now
Hosting
Apto,
company. Yeah.
the nice little startup company back in the day in the UK that I worked with through to their eventual sale. So the exit for the owners, a little company called Netstore, managed services company. I've worked for Manhattan Associates, now quite a large US software company in the supply chain space, supply chain company GreyOrange, engineering software company called Aviva, not the insurance company, and in my own business, I've worked with very small companies in any other number of industries that you could imagine, architectural landscapers and all sorts of things.
And so if you were to take a snapshot, because you mentioned IBM, obviously very brand centric, very aware of their brand. Sun Microsystems, again, another business that was very aware of the power of brand. But presumably that's not always been the case.
They're the only two that for me in my career that stood out. For a different reason. At the time, I was at IBM when the UK business was $1 billion company, let alone the rest of the world. I was at Sun Microsystems when it was a $20 billion company and that kind of thing. At that level, you just think differently, it operates differently, and marketing functions differently inside those businesses. And I've been part of those marketing teams. Every other company I work for isn't anywhere near that size of those companies, and every other company I work for would fit into that. Most of them have been tech, and they would fit into that. The brand is secondary category because it's about, the short-term sales activation side of growth.
Yeah. When you're in one of those smaller companies where the temptation is short-term activation of sales activation, how do you go about demonstrating and communicating to your leadership in those organizations that actually need to be putting some of their money into brand building? What's the kind of argument that you've had to articulate?
If I knew the one answer to that I could just go and replicate, then, I would have been off and probably doing that more frequently and more successfully than I've been able to do. There isn't any one particular way. It's about when you're fighting, all of the forces against you that we would be familiar with. The first and probably most powerful force that's working against you is the quarterly cadence of these kind of businesses typically. The second force that's usually working against you is leadership is coming from one or two places. It's coming from, as you described earlier, from, a founder tech engineering led kind of mindset and culture where, it's the build a better mousetrap syndrome. I've got great tech. Everybody should know that. Just go and sell it. Or at that leadership level, it's coming from, the kind of the very sales-led kind of culture. Very seldom do you find a leadership chief exec or something very close to the chief exec that has come from a marketing background or any kind of related background. So you're fighting those forces all the time, and they're very, very powerful forces. So convincing them that they should actually be putting more money into this idea of brand is not easy. The other thing that you'll be fighting is that because people, when I say people, typically this kind of leadership, brand isn't what we might know it to be. Brand to them is usually the logo that's on the outside of the building, and then everything that sits behind the logo, which is usually back to their products and their technology and everything else. They don't see brand as kind of a fundamental position in the market, how you differentiate and how you add, how you build value for your customers. So the battle to convince them that this kind of slightly softer edge is the one of the most important edges that you should be working with. It's a toughie, and I've never found one right answer. I've done all sorts of different things, many different ways, and we'll touch on them, I'm sure, as we speak, Richard. But to give one clear, I could give you one clear answer, but implementing it is very hard.
You've mentioned brand as something that has made it easier for prospects to select and differentiate. In those conversations that you're having with the organizations that you're working for, Are you positioning brand as a source of growth, as a tool for growth? Is that part of the conversation?
Definitely, it's a tool for growth, and it's interesting because the best time to have the brand conversation is when the quarters are getting tight, the targets are getting harder to reach, and so on. Because at that point, you're starting to reach that point in the market where you've either lost your differentiation, you've got more competitors have entered the market. It's all getting a bit more pressured, and of course, the bigger you get, the bigger the numbers you get, and it's hardest to get. And then suddenly it all begins to kind of manifest that there's another problem going on. And the other problem, of course, is the brand problem. And that has multiple effects. It has that effect of recognition in the first place and the ability to, select you early on. But the second is it starts to have that kind of internal negative effect on the work that you are doing, your short-term activation work, the stuff that marketing typically does inside these kind of companies, which
that's
is
like lead generation tactics and
lead gen, whatever we can call it, all those kind of things. But yeah, that's the work that marketing largely ends up doing, and that gets increasingly less successful the more the brand work isn't done.
which is a recipe for disaster.
And there's a misnomer, by the way. There's a misnomer. Those two things are working together. And what I mean by that is that if I'm doing, what I might consider good marketing, I'm running lead gen campaigns and all of that kind of stuff, that actually that's having a brand effect as well when I'm building the brand alongside that. And, you could argue there's probably a little bit of truth in that. If you're putting comms out there, you're having a little bit of an impact, but that's not building a brand. That's just comms.
One of the points of that is the relationship, I think, between B2B sales and brand building. Obviously, that's changed since we all started work because I think the two were probably quite separate disciplines, but I see them merging ever more every day. Can you talk to me about the relationship that you see between B2B brands and sales today?
Well, I mean, they should be joined at the hip. They are two sides of the same coin. I mean, probably the most quoted piece of kind of research in that kind of brand versus sales or activation space is the Lesfield Peter Binet work. The long and the short of it is advocated, has proven beyond shadow of a doubt that when you're allocating your resources, you're probably going to allocate slightly more towards brand building and slightly less, 60-40, 55-45, whatever the split, it doesn't matter. But you're allocating slightly more that way. And so it should be in terms of how that relationship is working, that you've got marketing should be putting more emphasis on the long game and building the brand position and presence. And with sales, then following that up with, your activation, your lead gen activity, of which sales have got a big part to play in that process, as we know, to benefit from the brand work that's taking place. And when the brand work doesn't take place, the second bit becomes harder the bigger you get.
I think you told me, you gave me an analogy once about the way in which marketing, and in fact, you were talking also about earned media, can play in terms of fertilizing the field of opportunity that a brand is operating in.
It's interesting because and I'm going back some way now, but and I don't even know if it's true to this day. I'm sure it is, and if not, there'll be a variation of it. But back in the day, the Chartered Institute of Marketing in the UK, their definition of marketing was always the role of marketing is to create the environment into which profitable selling can be done. You think about that as a statement, create the environment into which profitable selling can be done. In other words, you kind of got to fertilize the ground a little bit before you can go and reap it. And the problem is, go back to where we started, is that, companies come into the market for the first time with a new product, something different or whatever. Of course, you get out there, you've got the right product, someone buys it, and then suddenly you're growing and the business is going all right. That almost proves that, oh, you don't need any of that other stuff. Look at this, we're doing great. And that's true. There is, no doubt about it, that is true. But there is a point where that doesn't work anymore.
That growth spurt needs sustaining.
So, a bit like farming. If you've not been plowing and preparing the ground, it all goes a little bit fallow. Sure, with your listeners as well. We've all been in companies where, the quarter's tight, or, we're going to miss the number, what we're doing, And then the worst case scenario for a marketer, we've all been there, countless times I've been there, which is like, you're in Q3, it's looking like you're not going to make the year, Q4 left to go, and it's like, right, we've got to do something. What's marketing going to do to save the quarter or whatever? And it's just pointless.
It takes longer. Yeah.
It almost doesn't matter what you're selling and how quick the sales cycle is, to turn stuff around in that sort of into a quarter period. It's just, it doesn't work. Marketing, we then fall into that kind of driven by sales volume trap. We need more leads. There's a brilliant piece of research done by Gartner. I'm probably going back a decade now. Brilliant piece of research done by Gartner that was looking at exactly that problem. When it's tight in the quarter, blah, blah, blah. What do you do? Do you open the funnel, more volume, or close the funnel, build value? And they were working with, this was research, out in the field with businesses, real businesses, and not looking at it from the marketer, but looking at it from the business operation, finance, and everything else. And the result of that was, was a resounding shut the funnel down,
which is counterintuitive.
Absolutely counterintuitive. But if you because if you think about it, even on a relatively short sales cycle, if it isn't in the funnel already, it isn't going to get in and get out in the time available for the quarter. So if you've got to do that next quarter thing, the best thing you can do is double down on what you've got, shut the funnel down, and do the work to, accelerate conversion of what's already in there than getting more in.
Sorry, because before we got onto this podcast, I was just reflecting on how I see often that end of quarter period, and in the clients that we work with, some of the more sales-led organizations. And what typically seems to happen is everything goes into sales enablement, producing presentations, getting emails out. And I remember there's an example where you come into a business that we were working with. And I think one of the first things you did was look at the PPC costs. Yeah. I remember you shut them off. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Obviously, we don't necessarily need to name the organization.
We won't name the company, but it was... And by the way, this is not the first time this has happened to me. I've done it. I've done it since in other ways on other channels. But in that particular company, I come in. They were spending just over 3 million Canadian dollars a year, given the size of the company as well. That was a huge amount of money. And there was this. It was like tribal myth that's how it all worked. That's where the business came from. It was untouchable. Even to the point where chief exec said to me fairly early on, if I gave you another 150K, could you spend that on PPC? And so I don't want 150K. In fact, I don't want the 3.2 million. And so with the team, the marketing team, we set about, because again, when the kind of that mentality, that kind of myth building approach to what works takes hold, rationality goes out the window. It's like, as long as the phones are ringing and as long as the inbounds come in, it's all working. People lose that kind of rationality to say, actually, is this good stuff? The phones are busy, but are we talking to people? Actually, it's almost like that goes out the window, strangely. So we set about doing the work to try and sort of work back, do all of the usual stuff, work backwards. We're spending this much. How much can we get out of it? Blah, 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 blah. And, I mean, again, like many companies, the ability to report and track on stuff was not great by a long way, but nonetheless, to the best of our ability, we were able to prove that on a $3 million investment, they were getting about 30K, per month recurring revenue. 12 months, 300 and something K. And I said to the guys at the time, I said, look, this is wrong. I know it's wrong. For a variety of reasons, all of the usual stuff. Systems aren't joined up, ability to track. So I said, let's double it. In fact, no, let's treble it. Let's say 900K. Let's say we got $1 million. There's still $1 million on 3 million going in. This is crazy. And
doesn't add up.
I took that to the management team, the board, fairly early on, and got shot down in flames. It's like, no, you don't understand. So I took it away and sort of thought about it for a little bit. And then just one particular day, I was actually working on a report for the management team, for the board. And one of the inbound guys came in. He said, I've just had a phone call from this prospect that had called in and asked whether we hosted exchange students in Twickenham. Now, it is true. Now, of course, I'm not going to mention the keyword or anything like that because that might expose a bit more. But it was basically inbound, driven off of a search for the keyword. But the keyword was so wide, so vast, so all inclusive that it was
And had
brilliant.
different meanings and different contexts.
And it was like that moment, this guy come in and I thought, that's it. So I changed my bull report.
Yes, because in that situation, your SEO strategy has worked.
Yeah, exactly.
It's brought in somebody looking for that keyword, but just it was a different,
Totally. And we'll come back to that point in a moment, Richard, because that's another really important point in this brand journey thing. But this guy came in, he said that, and I said, I'm done. So I changed the board report thing, and I switched it off. I stopped, cancelled it. We were using an agency in London to run all of this. I mean, we were paying them tens of thousands a month to run all of this SEO and all the stuff that goes around it, and we just switched it all off.
So the other cost that's part of that process is the processing of all those inbound leads that have come as a result of PPC and SEO. If you're saying that you're getting just 360,000, that's a lot of work.
So, well, think of the non-work, the rubbish that's coming in, that's got to be cleared out. That's got to be, you've still got to deal with it, right? Someone picks up the phone, you got to talk to them and answer it and close it off. All of that wasted time and energy. And it's like anything. The popular myth is, one of them will suddenly turn into a little bit of business, and then it's like, oh, well, there you go, look at that, it works. Yeah. Nobody accounts for all of that other stuff going on. We just get kind of caught in this trap. So So I switched off, stopped, and nothing happened.
Nothing changed.
Nothing changed. No, nothing materially, apart from people. Oh my god, it's all going to hell in a handcart, and it didn't. And what we did, we went and got. I can't remember who we got to do it. Now we went out to an outside consultancy research firm and got some market research done. Who would have thought? We spent some money of that saving on some market research to find out what the hell was going on in our market. And what we then discovered about our business was like, there was 13,000 customers at the time in the business. And it's always Pareto, right? 80% of the revenue is coming from 20%. And that 20% was, I don't know, 1,000, 1,100 customers. And it's almost like you could do no worse than spend a bit of time and concentrate on those, because the and then think about your marketing to go and find more of them, because the long tail were, Johnny in his bedroom building games on his own little web server, for $20 a month or something like that, and then causing all sorts of support problems, on the phone all the time because my server's not working.
High cost customer.
High cost at the back end. Yeah. And that started really a kind of a shift and a transition about thinking about the market, thinking about who the real buyers were, thinking about where value was, what was most profitable business, and of course. You would part of that as we went through that as well, Richard. So I
saw the success and the shift that happened within that. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is about earned media, because earned media has been the thing that's brought you and I together to work together, and that's led into content media and different things in different situations. But the role of earned media in the brand building world, can you tell us a little bit about how you view that?
Yeah, I mean, and you and I have spent many hours talking about this. So to me, earned media has been my kind of go-to secret weapon in this work of trying to get companies that don't pay any attention to brand building started. In the sense that the battle that's hard to win is the battle that says, look, I need money to put into advertising, because that's what we're talking about, really. Top of the funnel, advertising, brand comms, right? And that's the hard sell. But if I can create a brand effect of a different type, a more authoritative brand effect by using earned media, and respect the fact that that's going to be slower than if I'd just gone boom with some advertising, then it's usually an easier sell internally, which helps me.
Yeah.
Secondly, it works, no doubt about it. And if anyone's listening that doesn't sign up to a PR agency or champion, then they should be, because it's a big part of the mix. In all of the times I've been around this loop, it's effective. By any measure you want to measure it, whether you want to measure it by, some media related metrics like, shares of voice or coverage or anything like that, it's effective. But more importantly, on business impact, can I draw a line between that happening and that happening.
Cause and effect.
Yes, I can. Yeah. In many instances that happens. So it becomes like a stealth way of doing brand work, but through a different use of the tools.
And so for other people listening to this who might be in your position, there's many reasons to use PR, but one of them seems to be that it's helped you to get the board on board with the process of even beginning to consider themselves as being part of a brand.
Yeah. And of course, we've worked enough together. You know how some of that works, because for whatever reason, it's a more palatable channel for them to get their head around, really, and understand, not least of which because often they're part of it. We've put chief execs in front of Sky Media, Sky News. We've put people in front of serious press. They
feel it.
They become part of
Yeah.
And that's a much easier sell than me saying, hey, I want to go and create this brand film, and then I want to, throw it out over, YouTube, connected TV, and blah, 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 and it's going to cost you this much, but it's going to be good. That's the hard sell, even if it's the right answer. The easier sell is, look, we're going to do this media. Through that, we're going to build authority, we're going to build recognition, we're going to build awareness, and, we're going to build profile for the people that, built the stuff or sell the stuff or,
I've often seen people go from being very resistant to actually really enjoying it when they actually experience the process and such a fundamental part of it. You see a tremendous amount of validation, especially if somebody's a founder and they've created the business, or the CEO. They've done all this work, and all of a sudden they are important, and their perspectives are listened to. I think you see that transformation happening.
And to have someone ask them their opinion of something is thing. And also to see their mugshot in print. I mean, it goes a long way to buying you kind of credit for doing
for other stuff.
Where I am at the moment, I'm working with someone who regularly features in the media through your work, and is very thrilled seeing their mugshot appear again. Whatever. So,
talk to me about events, because we've worked together pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and post-pandemic. And it seems to me that at the moment, events, trade shows, exhibitions are back in fashion amongst brands. I look at that as being often the short-term activation problem that you've talked about. I know it's very expensive. There's loads of hidden costs. What's the role that events play in part of the B2B brand building and capitalization process?
Of course they work. It's like anything. It's like, just don't put all your eggs in one basket. And too often, it's the default basket for a whole variety of reasons, nothing to do actually with building the business. It's more to do with the, dare I say it, the kind of the ego of the salespeople. Sometimes, it's that, I'm out there, I'm the road warrior, I'm doing the tour, because, you get all of the trappings that come with it. You're often away, you've got the, you're doing your stage, you're doing your expenses, all that kind of thing. So it gets caught up in all of this other stuff that is peripheral noise and largely useless. But do events work? Yes, they do. But it's a tactic that should be used at an appropriate time. It's got a role and a place. And too often, particularly when I've gone into a company new, it's very unclear what the role of any particular event really is, because it's a channel, and like any channel, you can use it for multiple purposes. So I could make a decision to go to a particular event. Maybe it's the biggest or most prestigious or something like that. I could make the choice to use that and go to that event for largely brand purposes. Present. I want to be present. I want to be seen, and I'll invest a certain way, and I'll measure it in a certain way based on that. Equally, I want to go to an event because, I want to meet people and generate some leads, basically connections and relationships. That's a choice. I want to go to an event because I'm deliberately looking for an opportunity to speak and educate some people, be seen to be knowledgeable and that kind of thing. As we know, there's a whole variety of reasons I can go to an event. And I think what I've seen often is the real purpose is never really clear. It's sort of a brand, it's sort of a bit of a lead gen. Oh, and we've got a speaking slot and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It gets conflated that the elements then don't get measured properly. And you come out of the back end and someone says, oh, has anyone got the lead list? Where's the leads? Oh, we got, 50 leads from that, and it goes in a database, and not a lot else happens. And I'm doing a discredit here, but you kind of get the point. But whereas if you're thinking about, where your buyer might be, where they might be in their journey and all the rest of it, and there is an appropriate point where the event becomes potentially valuable, because now they're there, you're hitting them at the right time, and all of those other kind of ingredients. It's just a bit more, it's like most things, it's just been a bit more thoughtful and planned about the choices.
One of the things I hear a lot, because we've done the PR for Excel, the venue in the Docklands in London, and that involved working with lots of different exhibition and event organizers. We also looked after, through that actually, an event that you all heard of, Cloud Expo. We did the PR for that for a while. And so I met a lot of exhibitors during those different engagements. And one of the things I'd hear a lot was exhibitors saying they were here because they'd always been here, or they were here because their competitors were here, and kind of a shrug. They didn't know, there's no other real motivation other than, I guess, fear of missing out and because it's what they'd always done was the big driver, which is impossible to measure. I mean, there's no value to that.
Yeah. It's a big FOMO thing, isn't it? Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, for anybody that's worked in the, in the supply chain space now, the biggie was always Logimat in Germany, Logimat, the big event for supply chain. And like most events that take place in Germany, it takes place in one of these, these mesa complexes, these huge halls all over the place. It's a massive, massive thing. And it's one of those, you couldn't get a space in there for love nor money, because they're booked out for years, because you don't want to not be there. It's like,
and they're very clever at getting you to rebook on site on the last day.
It's, it's all of that kind of stuff. It's all of that kind of stuff. There was, I was working with an ITC, I was the marketing director of an IT security company some years ago. And at the time, I think it still is, but at the time, the big event was InfoSec at Earls Court. Of course, Earls Court not there anymore, but that was the big event.
Yeah.
And exactly. Oh, got to be there. And it was like, I can't remember what we were paying, but it was like a huge cost. The guys, I can't see any great evidence that the ones we've done in the past have really contributed. Just questioning, should we do it again? And again, another battle I won that we weren't going to go. Heaven forbid, we're not going to be there. It was the other side of Earls Court Road, and I can't remember the name of the pub, but there was a pub in this kind of little side street, kind of really nice little pub. It would, something like the Hare and Hounds or whatever. But anyway, this nice little pub. We booked the top floor, a private room, top floor, for like the 2 or 3 days or whatever it was of InfoSec. And so prior to the event, you do your usual thing. You're mailing your database and everything, and basically we're not going to be there, but we're going to be here. If you're on a drop in kind of thing. And we got some, we couldn't go too close to the venue, but sort of, as people coming out of Earls Court Station, that we're getting people just to drop a bit of a leaflet, if you're free, pop here. Do you know what? It was the best InfoSec we'd ever done.
Really?
Because
wow.
You know what InfoSec's like and that kind of thing. It's, you can't sit down. There's nowhere to go. You can't get a cup of coffee. It's noisy. So the idea of walking 400 yards or whatever, sitting down in a nice pub, nice conversation with a beer, on a Sunday afternoon or whatever. We couldn't get, you can get rid of people. They were like, it was fantastic. And of course, for the sales guys, they're sat there all day, they're having a few beers, lots of conversations. It was great. The best, and they never went back. So the company never went back to InfoSec.
Wow.
It was needed.
Wow.
So, it can be done. It's not, you don't have to be there. The other thing about events, by the way, which is a more serious problem, and it's a more serious problem for us as a profession, and I've seen this so often in the past as well, is that event is one of those, is like the default tactic, or certainly it has been on and off over the years, the default tactic, or we do events, go to events or whatever. And as we know, actually, the bulk of the work of events is a lot of hard work in preparation, logistics. You're getting, doing all of that stuff and all the rest of that. And, there's some people that are very good at that. Some people not so good at it. I've seen it so often over the years. People in a company that are good at just organizing and doing those kind of things and getting things done, suddenly move in and become the marketer or the marketing manager or whatever, because they were good at doing events, but they never really gone through that kind of marketing education piece and so on and so forth. And that then sits around in these companies where it kind of reinforces that it's if you're not careful, it's an exercise in logistics and stuff like that. It's not an exercise of strategy and planning, thinking about it, buyers and all that kind of stuff. it's a professional problem. This is something that, Ritson bangs on about, which is where the mini MBA comes from, and all the rest of it is the a lack of proper marketing education around around the profession. And events, sadly, has been one of those tactics that has drawn people in that way. Not that, not any fault of theirs. They were good at what they were doing, but they weren't coming into the profession as, the marketing.
And they weren't necessarily being given
they're not in a position to sort of like do the other things of, back to, dealing with the leadership, what they need to be doing about marketing strategy, brand, everything else. It's been difficult.
So, measurement. We talked about, you've been in different situations. Measurement is always tough. How do you measure the return on investment for brand building?
Well, I tell you how to do it, and then how successfully I've been able to implement this is or get companies to adopt this is less successful in that sense. But nonetheless, this is the right and only way to do it in my opinion. Before saying that, though, one other thing about measurement, which does relate to this whole problem of not paying attention or investing properly in building brand and staying in this kind of lead gen activation, space, short-term space, is that, we're decades in now, but as digital has come into marketing, and of course that is far easier to measure and track and look at it from any kind of dimension that you like. And that adds to this kind of, the short-termist nature, because it's like, oh, look, cause and effect, do that happens, that happens, which kind of almost kind of reinforces that kind of short-term behavior, because you can't measure brand in that way. So it almost pushes you away from, even thinking about measuring brand in any other way. But I think that exacerbates the problem. Anyway, back to brand. I say this because we're going through this process at the moment with the company, but the way really to measure the effect of brand, or the effect the brand is having on your business, more importantly, is to get the brand looked at properly. Brand assessment, brand audit, brand
Objectively, third party,
by companies that know what they're doing, they know how to do it, and go get that done. In the first instance, get it done, and I guarantee it will tell you things about your brand that you had no idea, you just didn't know. And it also shows you the answers. It gives you the answers as to what you've got to do. It's the only way to measure it properly, but also it gives you the tools and the language to be able to then go and take this conversation up to the board in a way that they will understand, and put things back in their language. But to get a brand assessment done, find out where you are, why, what's in the way. I guarantee if you do it, it's really revealing. The pushback or the reluctance to do it is that there's a bunch of things. Firstly, it's too expensive.
It's not cheap.
It's not cheap, but it's not as expensive as you imagine. And when you compare the potential impact from the value, what it will tell you about your brand, and if you can then do the work, the value that you'll get back from that far outweighs the cost.
And the cost of not doing it is
the cost of not doing it is you never measure, because that's that's just the lost opportunity cost. So, but you've got the cost barrier of doing it. It's, I can guarantee, I probably put my hand on my heart and say, guarantee every single B2B company, below a certain size for sure, does not do this, would not do this, and wouldn't allocate budget to it because it will be seen as too expensive. So that's the first problem, is the cost of doing it in the first place. The second problem is, back to that understanding to some extent of what really the job of brand is. And you'll get the pushback of things along the lines of, well, that's B2C. It doesn't affect us. We're B2B. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
Within B2B, it's almost like it's companies that are buying. Of course, we know that's not true, but you know what I mean? The kind of company gets in the way. We know that's not true. We're all people. Doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing. We're all people, and we behave like people. But it will get kicked into touch as it's a B2C thing, not a B2B thing. It's not relevant to us. It will get kicked into touch on the basis of, we don't need to do that because we know
instinctively.
We know instinctively. And of course, we all know, the humbleness of marketing and all that kind of thing. We all know that you can't know your customers ever. You've got to go and ask them.
Another pearl of wisdom from Mark Ritson, I think it was.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's true, right? It's this thing, and of course, most all consumer companies, B2C companies would think like that anyway. They wouldn't presume, they would go and find out. But exclusively with B2B, we think we know. So we don't need to know because we know it. So there's all of these hurdles that are in the way of doing it. But that's the way to do it, is get a proper brand audit done. Stick a line in the sand, benchmark it and repeat it. Stick it in your budget, do it once a year, and then build your brand plan around what the research is telling you, and the research will tell you what to do. I've seen it happens. So that's the way to do it. If you can't do that, what can you do? There's a number of kind of, I guess you might say, proxy ways of doing it. They're not extensive. They don't give you the depth, reach, insight, but they give you, you'll get an indication. That could be, brand searches to the website, traffic. It could be share voice in some way, shape or form. There's some other kind of, media or search inbound related ways you can get a brand sense, but they're not brand studies.
Well, and the problem with that is if they're not contextual and looking at your competitors at the same time, then there's no idea what is good or what's bad. It still surprises me. Some of the biggest companies we've ever worked with, blue chip, NASDAQ listed, multi-billion-dollar turnover tech and B2B companies, have in the end measured by number of clippings, just of their own clippings, and no context. And that's been what the board has asked for, because they've understood that. I think the people who have provided those number of clippings are actually doing a disservice to the people who are asking that question, because the question is always bigger than the number of clippings. The number of clippings doesn't tell you anything, but it's amazing how that still perpetuates. And I imagine that cuts through all the other different activations of a brand.
Yeah. It's like we know our buyers, we know who they are, we know where they are, we know what they buy, why they buy, and all that. It's nonsense. Nobody does. And you've got market research. How much budget is allocated to proper market research by any of us, any of our kind of colleagues, peers, others, listening, working in this side of the industry, B2B. How much is ever allocated into proper market research on a regular basis? How much is allocated into brand study or brand audit or whatever? And the answer is probably little or none in all respects, because research will be put to one side because we know, so we don't need it. The board will push back, not needed, we know, that kind of thing. The brand audit won't be done because, either brand isn't that important, or that's too expensive to do, or we know that we're well known or not well known or whatever. There's all sorts of other reasons. And so those things don't get done. The budget all goes into the short-term stuff, and then we fall into the short-term trap of there's never enough leads and you've got the right quality. And so circle goes round and
but everyone's busy.
Everyone's busy. And you're right. And isn't that a problem? Everyone's busy. Nobody's thinking.
Yeah. So I've got two questions about AI that I wanted to run by you, because AI and brand building.
Yeah.
AI is changing everything we hear. And I read recently that 70% of B2B buying decisions today are being made with an AI prompt starting off that search process. So how important is the brand in the world of AI?
I would say it becomes, if it wasn't important anyway, it becomes critically important, because, pre-search, it was, very direct marketing channels that we use, events being one of those. Obviously search comes along and online, and then search. But all of those things they're very direct connections.
Yeah. Telesales.
Database, I send somebody something. I've got a database, I'll call somebody.
Yeah.
I'll use these keywords, and that will connect with, people that are searching on those keywords. There's a very direct connection between your message and the audience that you're trying to attract.
Yeah.
AI has broken that now. It's not a direct connection, because AI is going to make its own kind of interpretation of what it is that you're looking at, and it'll go looking around for other things. And of course, for the little I know about AI, but, I think, we all know part of that is the LLMs. They're learning, they're educating, they're being educated by people, vendors, and all sorts of organizations are educating the LLMs, and that's all a content-based thing. And the brand is connected to that, because it's not just about what they're learning, it's who they're learning it from. And if you're not the authority and you're not teaching the LLMs, you're going to get left behind. No about it. So it becomes, I think, critically important because, you think about it. If you strip it back to some really sort of basic stuff, you think about some of the basic content stuff and, a brand name attached to content. We know that, there's a lot of companies in our space that churn out content that's we content. We're great. We do this. We're number one. We're the best. We've got the best tech.
Yeah.
And imagine that is the content that you're relying on to educate these systems about you or your role in this world. I don't think that's going to cut you through.
It doesn't connect. Yeah.
Versus, go back to the earned media discussion versus a brand whose name is attached to good quality, third-party endorsed, informative, point of view, opinion, content, well argued, well written, well produced.
Yeah.
Which one of those is going to play better in this
into the LLM,
choiceful world of the LLMs doing it,
taking us on our journey. And so, what do you think is going to be the future? If you look to the next 12 months, we're nearly at the end of 2025. So, if you look to the next 12 months, things are moving so quickly. What do you think is likely to be on the horizon in terms of B2B brand building?
If I'm honest, I don't think anything radically is going to change. I think B2B's got to grow up a lot in it comes around. If I've got anything to do with it, and I've not been, I couldn't say I've been desperately successful so far. But I mean, as you know from our conversations, I mean, this I think is just like the biggest miss that our part of the industry suffers from. Not all of it, but the vast majority of it suffers from, and continues to do so. And I don't see that rapidly changing. What I do see, which you will see and everybody else will see, and I think LinkedIn have been quite instrumental in this actually. There is a lot more kind of groundswell about the importance of brand in B2B. The LinkedIn Institute published some stuff about a year ago, maybe a bit less. And that was well received and well respected. There's been some stuff coming out of System 1 and Walk recently that sort of backs all that up. So there's a lot more kind of emphasis shift. The Field and Binet, long and the short of it, they did their work for B2B with the LinkedIn Institute and sort of proved that the same effect is in place, that the brand needs to be
repeatable.
Yeah. So I think just on what I follow, I do see this conversation far more prevalent. And so if that is going to have an effect, then it's a good thing and we will pay more attention. Actually, we'll probably be forced to pay more attention because of what we just talked about, the AI thing.
Which is generally a very optimistic note to be ending our conversation.
Not like me to be like, oh, it's what it is, right? I mean, it's work to be done.
Yeah, excellent. Alan, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your perspectives on so many different topics. I really enjoyed talking with you today, as I always do. So thank you very much.
Thank you.